So we talked on the schedule about doing a summary of the day. Well, that seems kind of silly since most of us were here all day. But not all of us. As everybody knows, there was the hearing on the Hill, Senator Cruz's hearing today. Several of you were there. A bunch were actually listening in, multitasking. Megan, as she's already explained, was there and has offered to provide her perspective, her thoughts, catch people up, get us ahead of the news feeds and everything else that I'm sure we'll be reading tonight, tomorrow, and talking about for the weeks to come. So I'll turn it over to Megan. Others who were there or have listened in and have perspective, please feel free. I'll come around the roving mic as well. Let's just share and kind of take stock where we are. Seems like a good point also coming off the last panel on governance and multi-stakeholder model. So.
Well, I'll try not to speak too long because, first of all, it's all on tape, so the sadomasochists amongst you can go and listen to it, the whole thing. And I should preface by saying I was really only there for the first panel and only a very short part of the second panel. So the first panel was with Goran Marby, who, as you all know, is CEO of ICANN, and Larry Strickling, who's the Assistant Secretary of the NTIA in Department of Commerce. And the two main questioners at that first stage were Ted Cruz and Senator Coons. Or you probably say Coons, don't you? Anyway, in Dutch you would say Coons, but it's C-O-O-N-S, that's his name. And, well, Cruz made a lot of comments, which I'm very sorry to say were not factually based. So a whole series of things like the IANA transition will eliminate freedom of speech, will have an impact on the First Amendment, the NTIA has violated the law by using funds to assess the proposal from the CCWG and the CWG, et cetera, et cetera. So there were a whole series of issues like that were raised, and I must say Larry Strickling did a very good job of responding to those on a factual basis, clarifying the issues, making sure that it was understood, well, it was understood, making sure that it was clear to everyone else, at least in the meeting, that what we were talking about was the supervision of the IANA function, and that's the only thing that was being transitioned. It's not the First Amendment rights that are going anywhere else, et cetera, et cetera. And Goran also was asked, unfortunately, to answer things like, can you guarantee that the bylaws of ICANN will never be changed in the future? Or can you guarantee that the jurisdiction of ICANN will never move from California? So there were a series of rather unfair questions, I think. I attributed them to the style of, when did you stop beating your wife? Type question. So those were rather unfortunate. But I think that also, to give him really credit, Senator Coons did a wonderful job of bringing the discussion back to the facts, making sure that it was really well understood what was involved, what was going on, what had been done in the, and so I thought that was very, very useful. So he'd obviously been very well briefed and he knew what he was talking about. So that was really helpful. So my overall assessment from that first panel was that the pro-transition debate part one, let's say, Oxford Union debating, I would have said that the pro-transition side won. On the second panel, and as I said, I couldn't listen to the whole thing, but unfortunately there were a number of, it was sort of a more balanced set of witnesses who were called, and of course there were a whole series who said, I paid $185,000 to apply for a name and I didn't get it. And I have an internal dispute with ICANN and ICANN hasn't ruled in my favor. So there were a number of sort of, I have a personal problem with ICANN and the transition is not going to help it, which of course is quite irrelevant, unfortunately. But those are the kind of discussions that unfortunately tend to color the water. So I'm a bit concerned about what might have happened at the end of the second one. So I don't know if anyone else had a chance to listen to the second panel or if anyone wants to dispute my assessment of the first panel or add to anything else, because I was only one of a number of people in the audience. Laura, you were there for part of it as well.
Hello, I'm Lori Schulman. I represent the International Trademark Association private sector interests. And I do share some of your concerns, Megan, in terms of the inaccuracies of even calling the plan an Obama plan when we know it's a community plan. I think that was one of the inaccuracies that I personally felt strongest about, being a member of the community and working as hard as we all have. In terms of the second panel, characterizing it, I've had some private disputes with ICANN, and they haven't gone in my favor, and the transition's not going to help. I do take issue with that broad of a statement. I think the people that testified, particularly Dawn Grove from Ping, the experience she had with her acquisition, the experiences with LegitScript and counterfeit medications being sold online, and what can or cannot be done within the policy remit of ICANN, arguably, there is an argument about what that policy remit is, although I am of a faction that believes there is a strong policy remit here and that there is a responsibility. I think that where there's a lot of confusion is, yes, the transition's technical, but the point that was being made is that accountability is being tied to this technical transfer. So the concern is that the accountability plans are either incomplete or not addressing issues of concern to the private sector. And even those in favor, and my organization is in favor of the transition, so we're not here to stop or delay the transition in any way. But there are concerns on that table, particularly when it comes to the accountability of the ICANN board, that I think are legitimate. And there are and I think that there are views that are up there that this is the last time to air them. I think what is unfortunate, because this hearing was held by such a polarizing legislator, is more of what the concern should be about. I think it's okay to have a healthy debate about how much accountability should be tied to the transition itself. That's fair. I think what's not fair to the community and to the process is how polarizing this has become, and that even if one were to support a reasonable delay with stopgaps because it's where it is politically, it's not tenable.
Yeah, Lori, I don't dispute any of what you've said. My point was that those aspects of accountability are not going to be changed by stopping the IANA transition. The first stream of accountability aspects have been developed and finalized. We still have a whole series of work stream 2 issues which must continue, and no one has said they should stop, and they won't stop. And we as the community have to make sure they go forward. And it's not to belittle the complaints. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't suggesting that these are non-issues, but they're not relevant to the IANA transition per se, and the fact that the NTIA has a contract for IANA supervision doesn't change any of the things that those people raised. That's my point.
Yeah, so that we would agree to, that the accountability must move forward no matter what happens. But unfortunately, or the accountability has now been tied to the transition, right? Or fortunately. You say only work stream 1, but yes, that's true, only work stream 1, but there's a concern that if the transition doesn't happen on October 1 as planned, that there may be some members of the board who say, hey, then we're just, it's going to be, I don't, yeah. I hope not.
Can I just add that point there? Steve Del Bianco made that today in the hearing. That if the transition goes ahead, then the new bylaws gives us as a community far greater power over the ICANN board than we've had before. We can spill them. And, I think, I don't know about you, but I don't think the ICANN board has that much longer. Well, no, now that we're going to have Becky on it, then hopefully that we're going to have a good board. But it's probably not got that much longer before it really has to fundamentally reform, or people are going to start talking about that. So I think it's a much better set of powers that will now be in place.
I agree. I mean, to be honest, I'm speaking now personally, not for my association. I am strongly in favor of the transition. But the reason I am is I'm afraid that if there's any delay, that all these accountability measures that we've worked on will either stall or slow down in a way we don't want it to. We've worked too long and too hard to have the momentum for workstream 2 stop. And I'm the sub-chair for the work group talking about the guidelines for behavior for board removal. So we're in the trenches. We're at the front line for this. Again, I'm not speaking for my association. I'm speaking for myself as a longtime member of the community. And that is my true fear. And that is why I found some of the discussion this morning completely, as you said, mischaracterized, unhelpful, really put the issues of the transition in a light they shouldn't be. And that we're in full agreement.
Indeed. But that was my point, too, for the second panel, that my concern was that those issues that were raised, which are perfectly legitimate, don't get me wrong, I didn't mean to mischaracterize them as not legitimate concerns. Who loves ICANN? Everyone has a complaint about ICANN, no question. But my point was that those will raise non-substantial issues relating to the transition itself, and will raise concerns amongst the broader population, thinking, what on earth are we doing? This is an organization that's not reliable, that's not accountable, that's not responsible, et cetera, et cetera. That was my concern, that it would have a negative impact on the transition itself. Not that things have to be changed. I think everyone agrees that things have to be changed, and we do have a lot of good things that have already been done in the accountability.
Just don't have a referendum.
That's not how we work, no. Yeah.
I'd like
Sorry,
to add
this
one thought.
time-
Is it okay? Sure. I'd like to add one thought, and that is basically, so what I'm hearing from the group, and I would believe that what we've got right now is a grand bargain. A great deal of ICANN accountability that continues to move forward, and the time in which to enact this accountability, finish these accountability measures and move this forward is now. Our organization, I2 Coalition, who's one of the sponsors of this event, put together a letter last week, which many of the people in this room have signed on to, that was actually entered into congressional record today and was talked about. Mark, your team put together a letter as well. A lot of people have spoken out and talked about how this is important to happen now. Since today's hearing, I have been reached out to by congressional offices asking for our group to come in and teach them about the IANA transition. I'm hoping that many of you in this room also get those types of calls, go out there, make those connections, continue to put out those letters. We're not done by a long shot. So beyond just recapping what happened, I hope that we take action to engage congressional members. We've got their interest peaked now, and go ahead and close the deal.
Okay, very short, as somebody who's been there. I want to voice a concern you voiced already, but I can't be strong enough. I think we shouldn't allow something like this, like that son of McCarthy this morning does character assassination, threatening, ignoring the facts and things like that. This just simply cannot go on. Because this is such a disrespect not only to Larry Strickland and other people, it's a disrespect to us and to the work we did all the time. And somebody like son of McCarthy has to be stopped, and he has to be called out simply with the facts. Even if people repeat it 3 times, sorry, this fact is wrong, he just repeats it again and again and again till somebody believes it. I know it's politics, but we shouldn't allow it because we are the one who pays the price.
All right, so on that happy note, thank you, Megan. Thank you, everybody who was there. It just seemed very timely to have some discussion. Of course, as everything sinks in and there's counterpoints made and whatnot, I'm sure we'll be reading and debating a lot more about the issue. It's almost top of the hour. I know that there's transportation for some, so we need to end on time. Tomorrow, similar start to the day. We will have coffee and light fare available starting at 8 o'clock. We will begin at 9. We have a panel tomorrow focused on more technical challenges facing registry operators. And then we'll have keynote address at the end of the day. And Christian has also agreed to mix it up a bit, drawing the audience in with more Q&A. We will just be having morning sessions tomorrow. We plan to finish the day around 11:30 a.m. So with that, I bid you all a good day. It's a pretty gorgeous day in Washington, so go enjoy yourself. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.